Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Okay, let's talk about the new moon in Libra, which occurs on the 16th. And Coco's coming to say hello. And say hello. 16th and 17th of October. Right, so this new moon is quite loaded, definitely very loaded. There are some pretty challenging aspects for sure. It's in a cardinal T-square. So the sun and moon, which are in Libra, that's a cardinal sign. There's an opposition to Mars. I'll bring up the chart in a moment. An opposition to Mars, which is in Aries and retrograde, of course. So that's another cardinal sign. And then there's a square from Mars and the sun and moon down to Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, which are all in Capricorn. That's the other cardinal sign. All of those planets are now direct. So pretty interesting loaded type of energy. And I think it's, well, the most obvious thing, it's speaking to the nature of our relationships and where we are at this point in time. You can kind of think about it from the point of view of, if we kind of think of the largest cycle of 2020, then we've arrived at that point in the zodiac, which is the middle point, right? So we started at Aries, where we had a new moon in Aries, for instance, and we've followed through all the other signs. So we've covered half of the zodiac, right, thus far. And in a month's time, we're going to have a new moon in Scorpio. So, I mean, we can kind of reflect back on that larger sort of picture, because at the point of a new moon being in Libra, yes, it's a new moon. So the new moon is dark, it's black, right? So you can't actually see what's there. It's a birth, it's a new beginning, as it were. But it's not a new beginning that's isolated to just what's happening on the 16th and 17th of October, for instance. It correlates to all the new moons that we've had this whole year, for instance, and what's kind of been cultivating, right, over a period of time. So in Libra, we're standing in a position where we're being faced off, with our relationships and just the experience of how we relate to other people, and particularly during circumstances that are so extremely challenging relative to 2020. Our way of relating and listening and sharing and cooperating and balancing out and stepping into the zone of how we experience others has been, extremely amplified and challenged so significantly this year. And, I mean, even in the news last night here in Australia, for instance, well, I come from Melbourne, and Melbourne is the city that's been hit the hardest relative to restrictions and so forth, right? And there's around about 50 experts at the moment who are pleading with the government to basically lift all these restrictions, because the mental health issue in this city, particularly relative to Australia, is so severe, particularly with the youth, right, with young people, adolescents and teenagers and smaller children as well. GPs are just inundated with having to give counselling sessions and medication to very young people. The suicide rate has increased. It's really very intense and very sad, actually. And this particular expert here in Australia said that the devastation relative to the loss of lives is and the not just the loss of lives, but the challenges that people are facing at the moment are not even due to COVID-19. It's just due to the nature of the dictation that's been forced upon us, right? So that's just an example of the severity of things and the impact on people's well-being. You know, Libra is an air sign, so it has got very much to do with how we think. You know, it's an air sign, but the thinking is totally totally born out of how we relate with others, how we communicate with others, how we listen to others, how we feel heard, how we feel listened to. The whole interchange between yourself and another person is Libra, okay? And that doesn't necessarily mean your partner, your husband, or your wife. Of course, it can mean that, but it just means any particular individual that you have an exchange with, that you relate with, that you communicate with on that one-on-one level. So that can be absolutely any person, right? So we're really dealing with a very, very challenging period at this point relative to trying to find our own sense of peace and equilibrium and balance and harmony within ourselves that's been so severely tested due to the nature of reality as it appears externally, right? The opposition to Mars is an extremely challenging energy to have opposite the sun and the moon. The sun and Mars being opposite each other is a purely combative, conflicting frequency, because one person is going to be the sun, one person is going to be the Mars. Both those planets are planets of will, okay, and drive and self-expression. So you have two facing off. The opposition initially manifests as a source of conflict, because what happens is we project, right, one of those energies onto the person opposite us. And until we find the resolution, we just project, right? So what are we projecting with the Sun-Mars opposition? We're projecting our own will onto the other person. That person's projecting their will onto us. So it's a battle of will, right? It's a very tense aspect. And then when you throw in the moon, because we have a new moon here, then we're talking about emotions being aggravated, stirred up, intensified, triggered, and so forth. And I just want to read actually just something about a Mars moon opposition, just a couple of comments. So it's a really testing and confrontational energy to be dealing with. Pressures and tensions in all relationships can be activated during this time. The nature of the opposition is that you find your own inward unconscious drives mirrored in someone else's actions. So think about that. Your own unconscious drives are mirrored through the person you're projecting that energy on. So you're seeing it as though it's the other person acting in that way towards you, but it's actually your own unconscious drives being projected onto that individual. That's why oppositions are so incredibly powerful. They do, however, ultimately have the absolute potential of leading to awareness, right? And being able to integrate that energy inside of ourselves as opposed to just projecting it, right? Okay, so it can be, I mean, Mars opposite Moon has a real irrational, compulsive sort of energy and expression to it. Yep, so it's just a few more comments, which is very much what I've already said. Emotional confrontations, which may be quite bitter, forcing you to encounter aspects of yourself that you are usually not aware of. That's what it doesn't matter what planets they are that are opposite each other. The principle of opposition is the same in that it's two polarized energies. One is going to be projected onto another individual. When you're talking about Moon Mars, it's aggravated emotional reactions, okay? And Mars is in Aries anyway, so he's pretty fired up. And it's retrograde as well. So this is just giving you some characteristics of the new moon being opposite Mars. But now we have to bring in the Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn And specifically Pluto, I mean, Jupiter and Saturn are just as important, but in a very different way. So we're talking about a new moon being opposite Mars, which is our Mars being our desires. You know, it's your personal will, passion, desire, instincts. It's what you want to take action towards. And the new moon in Libra is being faced off with that, kind of saying, well, I want to have, you know, peace, and I want to have balance, and I want a sense of equality, right, relative to this person or this relationship. But on the other hand, Mars is just flaring all that up. There's this pull of wanting to keep the peace, wanting to please people, yet on the other hand, unconsciously, strong desires being activated relative to Mars in Aries, which can be very, very selfish and self-centered as well. On the other hand, it is a planet that is there for a very good reason, and it gives us the ability to be courageous and direct with our own goals and our own willpower, and the ability to stand up for ourselves where we need to, you know, to fight for ourselves, to protect ourselves. So it's quite a complex combination. The square that's happening from Mars new moon to Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, I might actually just bring up the chart, because I think that will help us navigate our way through more effectively relative to visuals. So just bear with me while I bring up the chart. There's also some good news as well. I'll get to that a bit later. So here's the chart relative to Melbourne, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So the chart's going to look different, you know, pending your location, obviously, right? So don't worry about the location of the houses, in other words, is what I'm trying to say. So let's just back up here, actually, and I should have perhaps started with this. I've got Mercury in Aries, and it does tend to race a bit fast sometimes. Okay, so the moon, the new moon, is at 23 degrees of Libra. And the first thing you need to do, of course, is locate where is Libra in your birth chart, and where does 23 degrees actually sit in your birth chart, okay? Because that new moon cycle is going to start, you know, something new in that part of your chart, meaning in that part of your life, okay? It is going to connect to relationships, however. So there it is at 23 degrees. There's Mars at 20 degrees of Aries and retrograde. Here's the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter. We can even throw in Pallas Athena if we wanted to, really, but then I just don't want to overwhelm everybody. So let's just keep Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter in play, forming a square to the new moon and a square to Mars. Now we know that Mars squaring Pluto is a very strong theme that's running, you know, over the next sort of couple of months. Due to Mars going retrograde. It's a first quarter square, and it's in cardinal signs. Now, first quarter square is actually about taking action, okay? It's pretty difficult, though, because the square itself, the nature of the square, implies internal conflict. Then we have these signs being represented by the cardinal energy, and cardinal energy is also about action, initiation, okay? So we have this is seriously, this is a T-square, basically. It's a new moon involved in a very close T-square with really powerful planets. Two planets of the will, Pluto and Mars, then Saturn, which correlates to your perspective of reality, the structure that you've built around you, and then of course Jupiter, which is our desire to grow and expand beyond any limitations, really. And these three are sitting, you know, all together, as we know. And so they're basically squaring the new moon, squaring Mars, cardinal T-square. Now, in a T-square, to put it very simply, what actually happens is that the planets that are opposite each other resolve through the planet or planets down here. So let me get, I found a little tool through Zoom that I didn't know was, oops, there it is. That's not what I wanted to do though. just need to bring it out of the way. Yeah, just a little tool to help me highlight things. Just bear with me because I haven't used it before. Okay, here we go. So let's give it a go. There's the new moon. There's Mars. Okay, and let's see if we can get this. Beautiful. So there's Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And so this pattern is called a T-square, as I was saying. The release, the balance, the sense of equilibrium that needs to come through, the balancing of this polarity of new moon opposite Mars is going to come through Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. Now, it's much more complicated than a straightforward T-square, because a straightforward T-square would normally only have one planet, okay, down here, where we have Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. But in this case, we actually have 3 planets. So all 3 planets have something very important to radiate relative to the balancing out of these energies. But because, in my opinion, Pluto is, without question, the most powerful force in the chart, and it is the soul. So your own soul's desires on an evolutionary level, from previous lifetimes to future lifetimes to the present. So Pluto is the driver of the entire chart. Everything else dances around and within Pluto's desire and will. The reason at times the personality level takes over, okay, and the evolutionary intentions of the soul and the will are not met, is because the secondary layer, as it were, if we want to use that word, which is all the other planets, they are taking primary sort of force, that they are dominating the chart, because the personality is quite a dominating force in most human beings on the planet, right? There are only very few people that have the soul and the personality in true alignment. So the soul is a servant, if you like, to, pardon me, the personality needs to become a servant to the soul. Most people won't like that word servant, right? Because it has this connotation where a servant is of somebody of a lower kind of stature or status. And I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the personality is a vehicle to enable us to express ourselves, to show up here on this planet, to show who we are, what, you know, to express our talents, our gifts, to drive and act on our path, whatever that may be. But it's not supposed to be working alone. It's supposed to be aligned with the soul. So why am I highlighting all this? I'm highlighting it because this new moon is saying exactly that. You know, it's talking about Pluto is the resolution point in this T-square. And so Pluto is going to have the final say. If we look at what is the closest body relative to the square, well, the moon is, it's almost 24 degrees, and Saturn is 25 and Pluto's 22. So, you know, it's touch and go between Saturn and Pluto. But I guess what's really important with that is it depends on how this type of pattern unfolds for you relative to what you are working with, right? Because if you're working purely from the Saturn level relative to this T-square, sorry, my mouse is just doing a bit of a song and dance on its own. If we're just working with the Saturn energy, it's going to feel like tremendous tension from a restrictive level, you know, wanting certain things to to be experienced, to be received, to be understood relative to our relationships. Mars has a totally different agenda altogether. It's totally self-oriented, particularly in Aries. So, you know, Libra is about pleasing others. You know, it's about wanting to make everybody happy. And Mars is about directing his own will. So those two are clashing. And then you have Saturn squaring both those, that opposition, which is putting pressure on both those elements within our own psyche, within our own self, relative to what's happening in the world of my relationships. How balanced are my relationships at the moment? How much am I really able to see of the other person? How much am I able to listen to really hear them, versus wanting to do my own thing, wanting to express my own will, Mars, and direct my goals and what I want out of this relationship in this situation. So there's a kind of a bit of a split, if you like, but it can lead to resolution because oppositions frequently do. But the Saturn is hammering that energy right down, bringing in this sense of restriction, limitation, and also having to be realistic, right, about what's going on with these relationships. Okay. But Pluto, I'm just going to get rid of this tool because it's annoying my mouse. Okay. Pluto is the ultimate decider. Okay. As I said, it's the ultimate driving force of the chart. So here we have Pluto sandwiched right in the middle, as it were, pretty much directing and deciding what's actually going to be the outcome of this anyway. You know, Mars is going to kick off what he wants with his desires. The new moon is going to reflect and correlate to new seeds being planted relative to how we are basically stepping into the world of relationships, and just how we are communicating and able to listen to everyone around us, you know. And then Pluto is going to come in and say, well, what's the true intention and purpose here relative to your own soul's evolution? And I can't answer that for you. Only you know what that is, okay? But what I can say relative to this particular formation is that Pluto is the release point. So that means that the alignment of the soul's true intention has to be figured out in your own mind, in your own psyche, in your own consciousness. It has to be figured out through Pluto. And nothing is easy when it comes to Pluto. I just did a video recently that a lot of you shared a lot of your own personal experiences, and I really thank you for that, and I appreciate your appreciation of that video. It's a similar thing here, okay, relative to a new moon, because this new moon is not just going to be an energy that's around for the 16th or 17th of October. It's really taking us through the whole month until we get to the next new moon, which is going to be in Scorpio, which is a Pluto-ruled sign, right? So there's a momentum building up here, right, of very intense energy relative to our own personal needs and the needs of others, and the desire of the soul relative to its evolutionary path and intention. And it's at a point of tension, conflict and crisis, because it's something that we need to resolve within ourselves. You could be in a situation where a new relationship is beginning, or the potential of a relationship is beginning, or the relationship you're in is facing some really important challenges and confrontation relative to the imbalance that's actually occurring, right? That the new moon is going to highlight that pretty much over the next 4 weeks to some capacity. But the initial birthing of that is a very tense, confronting and challenging energy because of this T-square, right? In addition to that, we have transiting Neptune opposite Venus in this chart. So we're talking about more relationship features being combined here We're talking about two planets that correlate to love. Venus and Neptune both speak to the nature and experience of love. Neptune is unconditional love. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. Now, Venus opposite Neptune is the classic energy of idealizing a particular person or a relationship, making it something that looks and feels so beautiful and blissful and divine and magical and spectacular. But there can be a lot of disillusionment that subsequently unfolds and disappointment because we didn't take a realistic look at the person with the relationship, right? So we can be lost in you know, in this sense of feeling quite blissed out with some sort of connection. But if we're not realistic, and Venus in Virgo has to be very realistic, it has to be very earthy, very grounded, very practical, very logical. So we have this polarity playing into the nature of this new moon, which is speaking to relationships as well. And then we have Mercury, which has just gone retrograde in Scorpio, conjunct Juno in Scorpio. So there's a story unfolding here as well. Relative, Juno is the goddess of marriage, relationships, commitment, serious commitment. It's not just some one night stand or one week love affair. Not that there's any judgment on that, because that, that has its place and that's an experience for people at different times. But the point I'm making is that Juno was the dedicated wife. So here she is in Scorpio conjunct Mercury. There's a lot of energy around the thought process relative to one's own personal commitments to specific people in their life at the moment. And with Mercury going retrograde, there's going to be an incredibly deep process of reflecting on that, right? And it's not going to become clear, of course, until Mercury goes direct, which is not for another a few more weeks' time, right? But Mercury is going to be in Scorpio until the 2nd of December. So there's some journey there. We've got this conjunction, Juno and Mercury, relationship, commitments, deep thought processes around that. It could be the ending of certain types of commitments in our lives, or it could be the complete transformation of a particular commitment that we have to somebody, where something about how we see and think about that commitment, that relationship, that person is basically transformed, right? Transmuted and transformed. So there's one relationship signature. The other relationship signature is, of course, the new moon, and then, of course, a Venus opposite Neptune, another relationship signature. And then we have Mars and Pluto, basically in a square aspect, first quarter square, which is about wanting to take action and not wanting to be stopped, restricted, limited, told, no, you can't do that. Mars just wants to express its desires, its instinctual impulse and desires are just to absolutely go for it. And Mars is squaring Pluto, so Pluto comes in and says, well, hang on, hold up, take a step back. You need to work on this internal sense of conflict that may be going on within you relative to your, let's say, your physical desires, right? Relative to what are the soul's desires here, and being able to find some resolution between the two, which is very, very difficult with a square. Okay, you can think of a square as, an analogy would be, it's two, let's just use a very basic example, two pieces of furniture trying to take the same space. Can they do that? Not in this 3D reality, they can't. So you can see there's a fight and there's a tension between wanting to take control over that same space. And so one is going to have to kind of win over the other in some kind of way, right? But there's going to be enormous tension and face-off and conflict And this is not something that is necessarily seen out there so much. It's more of an inner position of tension and conflict that one experiences within themselves, but naturally it does get projected onto, you know, the conditions of your life, the situations of your life, the circumstances, the relationships you're in, and so forth. So there's a few interesting things going on. The North Node is trine the new moon, which is really, really good, and that's an air sign again. So we have air, you know, new moon in air, Libra, North Node in Gemini, air. So that's speaking to aspects of our own evolution collectively and personally relative to forming new ways of understanding Libra with new information that comes through Gemini in terms of how we relate and share with people from the point of view of communication and listening and knowledge and information, insight and understanding. And of course, you know, the South Node is sextile with the moon, right? So that's a very supportive, you know, aspect there with the nodes relative to this new moon, which is a cycle for the next month. And then the bigger picture, of course, is how this is going to, it's like a sequential energy that unfolds over the whole year. As I said, it started with the new moon in Aries, and it's going to go right through till the end of this year. And at the end of this year, we're going to have, you know, an eclipse in solar eclipse in Sagittarius. So that's going to be absolutely huge. Of course, we have the Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, which is absolutely massive relative to our future moving forward, where I think it's safe to say that we are still in a process of really letting go, Pluto in Capricorn, a lot of the old mental sort of constructs that have helped shape our reality and how we have perceived our reality, our life, right? We are still going through the process of having to remove layers. I know we've been hearing this all year, and it's probably like, well, when the fuck is this going to end? You know, it's been going, well, this is the thing, you know, nothing happens overnight. And especially when you're talking about a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which has been active for quite some time now, okay? And Pluto in Capricorn, which has been in place since 2008, right? So, you know, I mean, it's really important to understand that Pluto in Capricorn, by the time we get to the end of it, which is about, I think it's 2023 when Pluto first takes a step into Aquarius, and I think then it goes retrograde, and so it's not till the year after that that we really start to step into Pluto in Aquarius, you know. I love Pluto in Capricorn because it's just smashed through so many different systems and realities that have needed to basically deconstruct, that have been built on control and authority and domination in a quite an imbalanced way. So I really appreciate Pluto in Capricorn. But, you know, we can think about this, you know, relative to just the deconstruction that's occurring in our own life, which is, it's really hard for people to accept that and understand that, you know. And the COVID-19 has just been the absolute pinnacle, you know, of being the advocate for what's, you know, what we're all experiencing relative to the nature of reality actually changing completely, and the inability to be able to accept that and to feel safe, right? Because Cancer is opposite Capricorn, and Cancer is the archetype that enables us to feel safe from an inner sort of space. It's a very subjective sign, but it does create that internal sense of emotional security, and it's being faced off by Pluto in Capricorn, has been for a long time. So our safety has felt quite threatened, you know, for quite some time, because our safety has been, you know, projected onto these false structures, if I can put it like that, you know, this idea of what life is really about. And so now life has been deconstructed, you know, pulled back, so that the new paths can basically start to be born. And it is human nature, and I've said this so many times through the year, it's human nature for us to just hang on, you know, we hang on and we hang on and we hang on, because stepping into the unknown is not something that a person naturally just likes to do. It just brings up fear, anxiety, insecurity. You know, it's not an easy thing, but it's abundantly clear that everyone has not been given a choice relative to that. We just have to do it. You know, a lot of people are struggling. You know, a lot of people are working as much as best as they can, right? So it just depends who you are and what's going on in your life, of course. But you know, we just have to keep in mind that this energy of Saturn Pluto conjunction, in some way, shape, or form, has been speaking to pretty much every new moon we've had all year anyway, because it's there as a fundamental theme and tone and undertone of what's happening in the collective anyway. Okay, so what's the good news? The good news is this, that the fixed star Spica happens to be conjunct the new moon. So in short, we're looking at a month of testing, confrontational, challenging aspects of relationships or relating to others. A sense of wanting to have some sense of peace and balance, and feeling that that comes at the cost of our own personal sort of desires. And Pluto, by the way, I mean, I've spoken about it from, you know, an evolutionary level relative to Pluto being at the apex point of this T-square, describes the release of this particular new moon, and that it's in the T-square, right? So the resolution point of Mars opposite the new moon is going to come through Pluto. Now, if one is working at the personality level, which is, you know, many people, and that's not a judgment, you know, that's just a way of expressing something. The Pluto at the apex point can be, Pluto is the master manipulator, okay? Literally the master manipulator of all things. When it wants to operate on that level, when somebody is operating with Pluto on that level, a strong Pluto signature in the chart can be a master manipulator, period. You can view that however you wish, but that is a fact. And that's why, you know, all these energies, all these planets in the solar system, Pluto is the furthest away, right? It's 248 years. It takes 248 years to do a complete lap around the solar system. So it's the furthest away, and it's ironic because in the world of astronomy, it got, you know, its status was decreased, its name was changed, and, you know, all this crap came along trying to disempower Pluto as if it wasn't this powerful body. And the irony is that Pluto is the most powerful force out of anything and everything in the chart, and it's the furthest away. And it's a bit like it stands back behind the scenes, the furthest away from all the other planets in the solar system, and its energy is just infused over, you know, cycles that go on over hundreds and thousands of years even, right? So its frequency gets infused over periods of time and cycles through all these other planets. So it's Pluto that is pulling the strings, okay, relative to how all the planets are going to express themselves, let's say. That's why Pluto is the master manipulator. So if we are to take it from that level, then Pluto being at the apex here of this T-square relative to this new moon can be an individual that can be very forceful, very intense, very manipulative, very controlling, very dominating relative to what they are wanting to achieve and accomplish in their experience of relationships at the moment, which is going to be totally highlighted for this month because of the new moon in Libra. So it's just a very simple way to put it, right? And to add to that, let me just see if there's anything that I could add. Yeah, so Pluto can be relentless, right? And in this particular configuration here, it is relentless, and it's basically it's very one tracked. You know, it's like, this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to go and get it, and this is what I'm going to do about getting it. It's just very sort of one track sort of minded or focused, you could say, because of the relentless sort of drive behind what it's wanting to accomplish and achieve, if it's working on that personality level. And most people would not even be aware of that. You know, that most people aren't going to sit back and say, oh, I'm working on that personality level because I'm really trying to manipulate this person in this situation so that I can get my desires met, right? Most people are not going to even think of that. It's just that these things go on very sort of instinctively, impulsively, compulsively, which is Pluto, right? But it is, Pluto at the apex of a T-square is actually the most challenging planet to have there, okay? And you may have a T-square in your natal chart with Pluto at the apex. It's literally a life theme that you're going to be constantly processing and working through. And it's like the planets that are in opposition are always going to be sort of thrown off, right? Decentered, until you get that Pluto energy working correctly relative to the planets that are opposite each other, because they've got to come through Pluto's channel, as it were, filter, right? So it just depends how one is working. It can also be feeling, because this is such an extreme force and energy, it can leave a person feeling quite torn apart inside between his willful desire to fulfill ambitions through force, manipulation, or subversive actions, which is what I was just talking about, right? His willing desire to purge himself of all temptations to abuse power in order to gain control over others, which is what I was talking about relative to Pluto at the personality level, operates very much at the person's own personal desire, you know, what it is I want, and I'm going to basically go and get it. I couldn't give a shit about, you know, X, Y, Z kind of thing, right? But it's not even that. It's not even so much that you have that kind of narrative in your mind. It's that the force of Pluto is so freaking powerful. It's so dominating. It creates compulsive and obsessive behavior that we can feel is out of our control. We just can't control that impulse, that, you know, that thing that we want to do, right? And so this is where we have to check in with our own selves and basically be totally honest, right? And ask, what is the real motivation here for what I'm doing? What is the true, authentic motivation? You know, so that's up to us to ask those questions. Now, I'll just finish up with reading a little bit about Spica, the fixed star Spica, which belongs to the constellation Virgo, right? So, stretch. I watched a webinar just the other day, and the person who was speaking in the webinar, he just got up, he put some music on, and he got up and he asked everyone to kind of just dance. It was relevant to the context of what was being shared astrologically. It was so much fun, and I thought to myself, because I love dancing, some of you know, some of you don't, and I thought, I wonder how it would be like if I just introduced something like that in my video presentations. Would you guys actually get up and dance? I probably would have to do it with the full moon in Leo or a new moon in Leo, right? Because Leo is like a bit of a party type of energy. It's that creative, fun, you know, That's just the side note. Okay, just having a bit of fun, just playing, like to play. So now the fixed star Spica is currently at 24 degrees. Now fixed stars move really, 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 really slow, okay? They stay on 1 degree for many, 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 many years. I think it's 72 years. 72 years? I just can't quite remember, but it's a long time. So the fixed stars don't move like the rest of the planets in the solar system move. That's why they're called fixed stars. They are fixed in a particular position in the sky, right? Whereas all the other planets have these orbits and cycles and so forth. So the fixed star Spica belongs to the constellation Virgo. So she's in there with some other fixed stars that correspond to the constellation Virgo. And, you know, I mean, how significant is it that this fixed star Spica is conjunct the new moon? Well, I think that would really probably, if I'm going to be really honest, which I pretty much am, if Spica is not necessarily quite prominent in your own chart, then the Spica effect may not have much of an effect, you know, relative to this new moon. It may or it may not. I don't like to glamorize things and pump things up and just make things sound, you know, oh, you're going to have, you know, this magic and that magic, and it's going to be absolutely blah, 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 blah. It's just bullshit, you know. I mean, I like to keep it real, you know, whether it's good or whether it's challenging or whatever it is. On the other hand, we also do need to understand always, you know, something is neither good or bad. It's just archetypically, it is what it is. The nature of a particular archetype and its inherent frequency, which is characteristics and so forth, that is what it is. But how we interpret that, how we embody that, and how we express that, how we perceive that, and what's happening in our own life and who we are as an individual period and a soul and our own evolutionary path, all those things are going to influence how a particular archetype speaks to you, whether it's in the case of a new moon, full moon, a planet going retrograde, etc. Right? No two people have the same experience or see things in the same way, you know. So the fixed star Spica is a really beautiful, powerful fixed star that has a lot of sacred gifts and blessings and abundance associated to her. And there's a lot of fixed stars, and a lot of them have a really bad reputation as well. But she's one of the ones that doesn't have a harsh reputation. In fact, she acts as a bit of a protective force for people as well. So have a look at where 24 degrees is in your chart. You may have your sun there, your moon, your Mercury, Mars, Venus, etc., etc. You might have her on an angle in your chart. You might have your ascendant at 23, 24 of Libra. That means Spica's on the ascendant or the descendant, you know, or the bottom of the chart or the top of the chart, okay? She could be conjunct any one of the other planets. I encourage you to have a look because she's a very favorable star. And so if it is the case that she is at a particular point in your chart, in your natal chart, relative to, you've got something at 24 of Libra, or 23 Libra, or 22 or 25, right? Somewhere around there. Or you've got an angle at those degrees somewhere, then Spica is there for you all the time anyway. It just means that this new moon is giving birth to something there in your chart relative to the planet it's aspecting, okay, and relative to the house that it's in. And Spica is there for you anyway. You get what I'm saying? So for those that have it in a prominent position, this can be something really beautiful that is born, right, during this time and over the next 4 weeks. That can be a process where you can, I suppose you can tune more into the gifts of Spica and what she has to kind of offer you, right? I mean, Spica would be important, you know, when she's prominently placed in the chart. She would be important as a total theme throughout your life. But in my experience, I have Spica very prominently placed in my own chart, and I can identify certain periods in my life where I've been, totally protected. Gifts have come through, as in my own inner gifts, coming through relative to the context and situation of my life. And so I don't think it's something that you are able to see and identify, 24/7. And that is pretty much the case with anything in your chart anyway, right? Things get activated and highlighted at very specific times in life. That's why timing is so important, right? And when it comes to timing, for instance, when you see somebody who's having what appears to be a stroke of luck relative to something that's going on in their life, you think, gee, that person is so freaking lucky. Well, it's not luck. It's called a trine. A trine aspect produces what seemingly appears as luck on the external level, meaning you're at the right place at the right time, and all the energy is just completely flowing in the direction that totally supports the situation that you are in, whatever it may be. It can be anything. You could be an athlete, you could be a dancer, you could be whatever, it doesn't matter, anything, right? So just some comments on Spica, and then I'm going to go. So most of the great stars have negatives associated with them, but not Spica. This is a very refined star which channels the will to power skillfully and leads to great success with little or no harm done. According to the old law, any injustices suffered under Spica will be uncovered and properly redressed. Part of the imagery of the maiden as Astrasia, Lady of Justice. This star gives goodwill, help at the right time, the opportunity to develop your talents, and even potential for worldly honor and wealth. If Spica is one of your stars, luck has a way of shining upon you. So that's a different thing to what I was saying before, right? According to this information, and this is what I'm reading out of for those of you that are interested. I've shown this book before many times. So Roderick Kidston is the name of the author. Best book, one of the best books I ever bought. The Magic of the Stars. Okay, it's this guy's life's work. It's just pure magic. If you're into fixed stars, okay. And Spica has a reputation, as the information says, as just her very frequency, nature, inherent makeup, who she is, just brings that stroke of luck into the person's life. Okay, so that's different to a trine aspect relative to what I was saying before. It can take you far beyond your original circumstances or maintain you when times get tough and danger seems to loom. And, I have to say that's really true, because I've been in some dodgy situations throughout my life, because I'm pretty adventurous, I love to explore. I take a lot of risks. I'm an Aries. Aries is just, they love taking risks. It's just how it is. You can't get away from your sun sign. You literally cannot. It's always going to be such a big dominating force of what reflects how you are as a person. It really, really is. So I've been through I've traveled the world, I've seen a lot of different countries. I've done things and entered situations that many people wouldn't. And some of which could have potentially been quite dangerous, but I fortunately, and it's Spica, I'm so blessed, I never had anything go sour or go in a way where I was harmed, right? So I can 100% tell you that is absolutely true, what it's saying here, right? Spica is a fertile star on whatever level is required. It also offers protection, whether from your own folly or hostile external influences, and the gift of subtle guidance. About the only thing that can go wrong with Spica is a failure or of further effort on your part. So this is the thing, when we're not in tune with our chart, which most people are generally to some extent, some more than others, the more in tune we are really, the more the potential of what is inherently there gets expressed, embodied, experienced, right? And so if you're not conscious of Spica and you're not appreciating and recognizing the power of this fixed star in your own chart, then you're missing out, because we all have blind spots, right, in our life. And so that could be one of the blind spots, just not seeing the magnificence of the beauty of this star. Okay, and just to finish up, the best harvest occurs to the dedicated farmer who tends the crop with diligence and care. And that's just, going back to the only way you can screw this up with Spica is to not know and to not be honoring and embracing and realizing the potential that's there for you. And so when you do that, it does mean taking care of things, just like the farmer takes care of his crops. You don't plant a seed and then just neglect it, right? And just leave it and expect it to grow into a beautiful rose for you. You've got to nurture what it is you're trying to develop, whatever it is. So abundance is made manifest here, and it's one of the stars for visualization and affirmation. That's such a fascinating point to me, because I've always been into visualization and affirmation since I was probably a teenager. Always had that ability to tune into that, to understand the power of it and the importance of it. And it's something beyond the popular mainstream sort of school of thinking that came out in the last 20 years, 30 years, let's say, probably 20 would be more accurate, relative to having the belief that what was that movie called, The Secret, for instance, where that in my understanding, right, that promoted a belief that was actually quite false, because it implied that you can change your entire life on every single level just by visualizing and just by affirmations and just by believing in something. And that is, in my opinion, absolutely not true. Can we have different experiences? Can we grow and develop and evolve? Yeah, that's what we're doing every day. Are there certain things that our soul has kind of set up for us to meet, to work through? Yeah. How we respond to that is where we have some free will and choice. But to say, for example, somebody is born with some genetic predisposition and it gets triggered at some point in their life relative to some medical condition, right? You're not going to visualize that away. Even Wayne Dyer, right, who's one of the people you could say in the last 20 years who's been, a very powerful figure relative to all this sort of stuff and other things as well. He worked quite strongly with the Tao, the teachings of the Tao. And he himself in the end died of cancer, right? And so he wasn't able to visualize it away. It's important to be realistic. I'm not saying that people can't be triumph and can't overcome things. People can, and they do all the time. But it's important to be realistic about what we need to be really authentic about in terms of what we have to evolve. in this lifetime. You know, what's the work that we have to do? What is the work that we have to do? And to stop trying to make it something else. It's the embracement and acceptance that creates the flow and the ability to grow through things. It's the resistance that creates the suffering and the hardship, very simply. So yeah, and just finally, Spica is a highly spiritual star. At its best and purest, it is a direct channel to divine love and blessing. Now, the irony of that is that you guys would probably be aware that every time I start my video, I say blessings, beloveds. And every time I write a post, whether it's on Facebook or even on my YouTube channel, I always end it with love and blessings. And what does Spica do? She connects you to the divine love and blessing. So these are not coincidences. We need to be able to make these connections, you know. She's a spiritual star, and spirituality is not just a word for me. It's not just a fad. It's not just a phase. It's not just something that I'm making out to be. You know, it is such a huge element of my beingness. It has been most of my life in some capacity, in some kind of way. I've never been driven or motivated by the material world. I literally haven't. If I had, I'd be in very different positions to what I am now in a material way, but I'm not. I never have been. And what has motivated me more and what has inspired me more in spirit is my spiritual connection to life. And that's what Spica brings forth. That's what she taps into. That's why I've spent so much time talking about her in the last 10 minutes. So she is conjunct the new moon. If she's prominent in your chart, this could be you may have never heard of her. So maybe this is just a beautiful gift hearing about this, because it's something that now you can begin to explore. That's one thing. Maybe you have heard of her, and maybe just being reminded of her right now just gives you that extra kind of focal point, right? Because this new moon is totally charged with the possibility of explosive energies all around. That's the truth. It's a cardinal T-square. It's Mars-Pluto square. It's Mars retrograde, Mars in Aries. You know, it's a totally dynamic, loaded, charged new moon cycle that can cause a lot of potential conflict, but can also really be very powerful in the aid of our own sense of clarity relative to our own experience of relating and relationships as well. But the fixed star Spica can just add this whole other dimension that you can really focus on and nurture. So wherever that new moon is, Spica is there in your chart. Just have a reflective moment process relative to what she means and what you could do with that yourself, because what you do with that is going to be different to what I've done with that. So it's a source of inspiration though, right? That was the whole point of bringing her in. Okay, I'm going. See you guys really soon. There's heaps more to talk about. There always is. And I will be back to talk about some other things coming up. Keep in mind, Mercury is gone retrograde. We know what Mercury retrograde means on that external level. I don't need to repeat that. We pretty much know all the, world of communication, written or spoken word, just gets tipped on its head. Okay, so there can be a lot of miscommunication, typically data going missing, information going missing, crossed wires, misunderstanding what somebody said, text messages being half sent, half read. It's really funny what happens, but it can be quite problematic, So But on the deeper level, of course, Mercury in Scorpio is really going to open your eyes through X-ray vision to really have a look at your own sort of desires and motivations on things. Okay. All right. I'll see you guys very soon. Much love and happy new moon in Libra. I hope it's a good journey for you over the next 4 weeks. Remember, the next one's in Scorpio. Bye for now.